In this very in-depth forecast, the southern central plains are currently being monitored for severe weather, as isolated severe thunderstorms could bring the possibility of isolated tornadoes, isolated damaging wind gusts, isolated large hail, and a continued risk for significant flooding. Everything you need to know here on Gladiator WX. Hello everyone, welcome back to another Gladiator WX weather forecast, and today I'll be covering the weather for November 20th of 2025. For today, we currently have a marginal risk for a great portion of the southern central United States for Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and portions of extreme eastern New Mexico there. Risks for today include a 2% tornado risk for a great portion of that region, mostly across Texas, the Red River, Oklahoma, and Arkansas, a 5% damage and wind gust risk, as well as a 5% large hail risk. For tomorrow, we don't have any areas that are currently being monitored for severe weather. Similar to our day 2 outlook, we currently have no issued areas for severe weather for our day 3 outlook. And for our day 4, day 8 outlook, we currently have no monitored areas. Taking a look at our excessive rainfall forecast, for today, we currently have a moderate risk for pretty much in the same area that we saw a moderate risk yesterday. So we're going to see the continued risk for the possibility of some isolated significant flash flooding and widespread general flash flooding across this region following continued rainstorms across this region. Definitely going to be a concerning risk, probably with a primary risk on top of our marginal risk for severe thunderstorms, given the fact that we aren't really expected to see that much of a severe significant risk for tornadoes, damaging wind gusts, or hail, but we could see the possibility of some significant flash flooding. In fact, I do believe there is currently a flash flooding emergency for a portion of Texas in one of these regions. So again, the risk for flash flooding, I think, outweighs our risk for severe thunderstorms. We also have a slight risk that extends across a great portion of eastern Oklahoma, Arkansas, and southern Missouri, as well as a marginal risk extending all the way into Tennessee and Kansas, as well as a marginal risk for New Mexico into portions of extreme eastern Arizona, and then a slight risk for coastal southern California there. For tomorrow, we do have a slight risk for Southern California into portions of southwestern Arizona, as well as a broad marginal risk for the eastern half of the United States for Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Illinois, Missouri, back into Kansas. Then for day 3 outlook, we currently have no issued areas for flash flooding. For our winter weather outlooks or our possibility of heavy snowfall, we aren't really expected to see any areas that are going to see extremely heavy snowfall greater than 4 inches, just some elevated regions of the Rockies, so snow isn't going to be that much of an issue for today. Taking a look at our weather models, the SPC website is currently having issues, so we're just going to use the most recent run of ACRRR for our forecast for today, or most recent run as of now, which is the 20Z model run, because the href because I can't access the href if the SPC website is currently down, so we're just going to use ACRRR. Taking a look at our 500 millibars and how that's going to affect our risk for severe thunderstorms for today, we currently have a pretty nice trough that's advecting across the southern plains here, which is going to support quite a lot of synoptic forcing and really kick off those severe thunderstorms, or a second round of severe thunderstorms that is expected across this region with the severe thunderstorms that we had yesterday. So given the fact that we did have severe thunderstorms yesterday, I'm not really too sure how that's going to affect the environment. Probably not going to be the most favorable environment for severe thunderstorms, given the fact that we just had storms yesterday. So there's likely a cold pool currently across this region that that we are currently trying to redevelop from, or regain instability from. However, we do have much better synoptic forcing compared to yesterday at 500 millibars, with 500 millibar flow that is basically encompassing this entire region out of the southeast, with 500 millibar flow upwards of the mid to upper 50s, and then back towards the west with a little bit of I think an embedded shortwave there with 500 millibar flow upwards of 70s to even the 80s. So pretty nice synoptic forcing, definitely going to support our risk for severe thunderstorms, as well as elongate some of those photographs and help with the shear. Taking a look at our 850 millibars and how that's going to indicate our risk for tornadoes for today, mostly because it's our low-level jet and then also our storm relative helicity. We don't really have that much strong 850 millibar flow across this region. We do have stronger 700 millibar flow, which we'll look at here in a moment. However, we do have some stronger deep layer flow at 150 millibars here, off towards the north and northeast there. So we could definitely see some better shear off to the northeast here, into Oklahoma, northeastern Texas, Arkansas, locations such as that. So overall, I feel like this area would be more favorable in terms of shear for the possibility of tornadoes. However, our instability is definitely going to be a little bit more limited that far off to the north. This area, again, is going to see more of a marginal risk for severe thunderstorms, so everything's pretty limited. Taking a look at our 700 millibars and how that's going to indicate our low-level jet or risk for tornadoes for today, we do have some stronger 700 millibar flow compared to our 850 millibars across basically the entirety of the 2% tornado risk region. So we are going to see a decent low-level jet, definitely going to kick off some okay-ish shear. It's definitely not the best low-level jet. It's definitely a bit weaker, but we do have 700 millibar flow, upwards of 37 knots. 36 knots, mostly around the mid 30s to upper 30s, with an area further off to the north where we could see some stronger 700 millibar flow and also stronger 700 millibar flow backing our storms. So definitely going to see a okay-ish low-level jet, definitely going to support that risk for tornadoes. Taking a look at our 200 millibars and how that's going to affect our risk for severe thunderstorms for today. We don't really have a whole lot of defluence aloft, so not really going to see that support from our 200 millibars. But notice how we do have weaker 200 millibar flow. It is decent, but weaker compared to a couple of days ago, with 200 millibar flow upwards of the mid 80s to upper 80s. But that 200 millibar flow region is going to move out of this region rather quickly and introduce some weaker flow back behind it. So depending on how quickly that is able to move out of there, it's definitely going to lead to a little bit more of a marginal risk for a hail, given the fact that we're going to see a little bit more marginal speed shear across this region, but still a risk for hail nonetheless. Taking a look at our storm relative velocity and how that's going to indicate our risk for tornadoes for today, we do have some okay-ish pockets of storm relative velocity that could get upwards of 100, maybe even approaching 200 meters squared a second squared of storm relative velocity in some areas. So there's definitely going to be some okay-ish storm relative velocity that's going to be sufficient for the possibility of a weak, isolated, brief tornado. However, as the day progresses and we see the temperature gradient be introduced more so as the sun begins to set, increasing our low-level jet strength, we're going to see more storm relative velocity at our 0 to 1 kilometer. However, we will have to watch for the possibility of our cape either weakening out, given the fact that we're going to see less sunlight, less destabilization, but also the expansion of that cold pool across this region. So there could be a brief window where we could have some more favorable risk for tornadoes later on in the next couple of hours as shear increases, but we will also be seeing the decrease of surface-based instability, which you'll see later. Taking a look at our bulk shear and how that's going to indicate the risk for hail for today. We do have some decent bulk shear values across this region with bulk shear at 0 to 6 kilometer getting upwards of 60 to 50, maybe even some isolated 70 knots in some of these regions indicated by our HRRR for basically the entire region, given our stronger synoptic forcing, our stronger 500 millibar flow, and then our pretty decent 200 millibar flow as well. Definitely going to support the risk for hail, as it's going to elongate some of those photographs and support the risk for some isolated hail. I think the major limiting factor when it comes to our hail risk or our risk all around for severe thunderstorms is going to be our instability, which is going to be quite marginal. Taking a look at our composite reflectivity and how that's going to indicate and then also affect our risk for severe thunderstorms, or how our storm mode is going to affect our risk for severe thunderstorms. What is currently ongoing is we currently have this train of storms along a boundary that is currently moving eastward, or more so northeastward. However, notice where our risk for flash flooding is mainly around this region. Same with our risk for flash flooding yesterday. It was mostly in that same region as well. That's as a result of these storms today and then those storms yesterday that sort of follow this path of just training off through that region, training off to the northeast, allowing for very heavy rainfall across a region for a prolonged time period as those storms track in the northeast, causing some really heavy buildup of rainfall, and again, a significant risk for flash flooding for today and then yesterday as well. And then for our risk for severe thunderstorms, mainly our tornado risk, what we're needing to watch for is going to be these supercells that could develop out ahead of our train of severe thunderstorms. While we could see the possibility of some embedded rotation that could support the possibility of a weak, brief tornado along this line, our primary risk for severe thunderstorms is going to be the possibility of maybe some of these more isolated storms developing into some better instability and some better shear out ahead of this line, because associated with this line as well, because it's not really moving a whole lot, it's causing a cold pool to build up in that region, meaning we're going to see less instability reaching this region. It's going to be mostly outflow dominant and just heavy rainfall and more of a flooding risk, maybe the possibility of a hail risk as well and some damaging wind gusts. But if you were going to see the possibility of tornadoes, it's going to be coming from these storms that are going to be out ahead of this system. Taking a look at our temperatures and how that's going to affect our risk for severe thunderstorms for today. Again, you can kind of already see that cold pool I was talking about, where those storms are currently, with some temperatures beneath that train of storms, mostly around the 60s, which is still decently warm. But given the fact that it is mostly downflow dominant or outflow dominant, then we're not really going to see too much instability. It is going to push a lot of that instability away from that train of storms. So again, the main risk for the possibility of tornadoes and our all hazards risk for isolated damaging wind gusts and isolated large hail is going to be those storms out ahead of it, where it is going to be in a more favorable environment with temperatures that are going to be getting up into the mid 70s, potentially even to the low 80s in some regions. So really warm temperature profile across a lot of this region. And if storms can develop in that region, they'll definitely be in an area of some really nice instability. Taking a look at our dew points as well, we are expected to see some really nice dew points across this region. Dew points that are going to be getting upwards of the low and mid 60s. Again, with those really nice temperatures, definitely going to see quite a lot of some decent instability across this region. Temperatures and dew points are definitely not going to be that much of an issue when it comes to instability. Taking a look at our lapse rates and how that's going to affect our instability. Keep in mind, these are our low-level lapse rates. Every time so far previously on this channel that we've looked at lapse rates, we have looked at our mid-level lapse rates, which is our 700 to 500 millibar level, which we will look at after our low-level lapse rates, but this is our 0 to 3 kilometer at ground level lapse rates. And then everywhere in this this red contour, this maroon contour, is where surface-based instability is greater than 500 joules per kilogram. We have some really nice very nice, but more mid-level, definitely not high lapse rates, low-level lapse rates across this region. Low-level lapse rates getting upwards of the 6, potentially even the mid to upper 7s. And then we can also look at our low-level lapse rates as well, where we're definitely not going to see as great lapse rates across this region, but we could definitely see some okayish lapse rates that are going to be getting at least above 6 in some regions. Definitely not too high, though. With our lapse rates that are going to be getting into the 7s, more so limited down to the south. But decent mid-level, weaker mid-level lapse rates, but decent enough for our instability, to aid in our instability. And then especially with those stronger low-level lapse rates, definitely going to help with our instability quite a bit. Taking a look at our instability and how that's going to indicate our risk for severe thunderstorms for today, we have quite a bit of decent instability across this region, with instability values that are going to be getting into the widespread mid to potentially even the upper 1000s in some regions. As of the most recent frame, or closer to now, it does look like we are going to see a little bit more instability in some regions, with potentially some pockets getting upwards of 2000. However, regardless, still really decent instability along with our decent shear. Again, definitely going to be favorable for the possibility of a isolated brief tornado within this region, if some of those storms can develop ahead of that system in our favorable environment. Taking a look at our surface-based instability and how it's going to indicate our risk for severe thunderstorms or possibility of surface-based storms. We don't really have a whole lot of issues with surface-based instability. It looks almost identical to our most unstable cape as well. So not really going to see too much of an issue with surface-based instability or the possibility of surface-based storms, given the fact that we have some really nice surface-based cape across this region. So any storms that develop within this region are probably going to be surface-based. Taking a look at our convective inhibition, how that's going to affect our risk for severe thunderstorms. We don't really have that much of a cap. However, now is definitely not the time for destabilization or erosion of that cap. As time progresses, you can see that the cap is going to progressively get stronger and be put back in place as we move into the evening hours. So that's going to hinder our risk for severe thunderstorms as the night goes on. However, as of right now, for the next 2 hours from 20Z, we do have a pretty favorable environment with not a whole lot of convective inhibition across a lot of central to eastern Texas, and then even into parts of Oklahoma, Arkansas as well. So definitely a decently favorable environment. Taking a look at our 0 to 3 kilometer instability, we have some really nice 0 to 3 kilometer instability as well. So definitely going to aid with the possibility of surface-based convection, as well as some strong instability at the surfaces. A really nice kicker for tornadoes if storms can actually get fired, given the fact that we also have some okayish storm relative velocity at our 0 to 1 kilometer range. If we can get storms to fire ahead of this system within this favorable environment, they'll definitely have the potential for an isolated brief tornado, as well as the isolated large hail and damaging wind gust risk. However, again, with that main area of convection, that train of storms, there's the possibility of a damaging wind gust risk and a hail risk as well with that, given the fact that we do have a little bit more outflow dominant storms. So it's going to provide a little bit more of a risk for damaging wind gusts. But then we also have some okayish instability wherever updrafts can interact with this nice favorable environment along that train of storms. We could definitely see some nice updrafts that could loft rain particles high enough to form isolated hail. Taking a look at our energy helicity index values, keep in mind whenever I say favorable environment for a setup like this, I mostly mean relatively speaking for our 2% tornado risk. I don't really mean like favorable environment for the possibility of like a decent tornado risk or anything like that. I mean, generally speaking, relative to our 2% tornado risk, it's going to be a favorable environment for a 2% tornado risk type of setup. And that is clearly portrayed by our energy helicity index values here at our 0 to 1 kilometer, with not really a whole lot of strong 0 to 1 kilometer energy helicity index values really at all. However, we do have a couple of areas where we could see the possibility of some greater shear and instability overlap. I'll just pull a sounding from here really quickly. See a very small curvature in the low levels of the hodograph, definitely supportive of the possibility of tornadoes in some spin up with around 156 meters squared second squared of effective inflow storm relative velocity. Again, very marginal curvature in the low levels of the hodograph, so definitely going to support a more marginal risk for severe thunderstorms or tornadoes, sorry. But then we also have some really nice elongated hodographs, so again, more of a hail risk, but really nice instability as well, with 1,981 joules per kilogram at our surface base. And just generally, it is going to be supportive of the possibility of an isolated risk for tornadoes. But again, just generally speaking, not really all that much of a risk for tornadoes in general. Taking a look at our College of DuPage model, our hail swath for the surface here for our risk for hail, we are going to see, again, that risk for isolated large hail with hail sizes that could potentially get upwards of 1 and potentially even 1.25, maybe 1.5 inches sizes of hail. So again, the possibility of some isolated large hail is definitely a threat across this region with that main train of storms, and then also the possibility of some isolated supercells that might develop ahead of this system. Again, definitely going to be the producers for hail, but also the producers for damaging wind gusts, and possibly the producers of an isolated tornado. Now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the socials for GladiatorWX and join the Discord for any updates on GladiatorWX. And hopefully I'll see you guys tomorrow with another forecast.